Hello and welcome. We did install our Windows Server 2012 for our domain controller. Now it's time to install the additional domain controller. And in order to install the additional domain controller for our New York office, what you can do is you can simply click in here in taskbar where you've got Server Manager. And once you click on Server Manager, click on Add Role and Features. Press next. It is going to be role based, and this is going to be the server where we are going to install our additional domain controller. In roles, make sure you select Active Directory Domain Services and add features. Press next. We do not need any features right now, so we are going to click on install. And once we do that, what it's going to do is it's going to install the tools, the management tools for us, and it is not going to make this server as a domain controller. So in Server 2012, whenever you want to make a server as a domain controller, the first step is to install the tools through Server Manager, and the next step is to promote that server to become a domain controller. Like in Server 2003, if you remember, when you were trying to install or configure a domain controller, what you were doing was you were using dcpromo command in your you were going to start run dcpromo, and then you were making a server as a domain controller. But with Server 2012, it is not like that. It is like two steps. The first step is go to Server Manager, install the tools from the Active Directory Domain Services tool from Server Manager, roles, add roles and features, and then once you're done, you can simply click promote this server to become a domain controller. Once you click in here, so if you remember, in our Sacramento office, because it was our first domain controller, we clicked on add a new forest. But this time we are adding this domain to an existing domain, which means that we are going to make it as an additional domain controller. And then we got another option in here that is an extra information that I want to give you, and that is for child domains. Where do we use child domains? Child domains are used in most of the organizations where they want to have security. Because, for example, you are working for a company where they have finance department, and the finance department says that our data is very credential, and we do not want to share any resources to anyone. So we want to have our own domain controller, our own users, and our own security permissions and everything. So what are you doing in here? You are separating their domain controller, but they are still part of the existing forest. They are not part of the existing domain. They are part of the existing forest where their domain name will be finance.elmjo.local. So whenever they create a user account in their Active Directory in their child domain, it will not replicate. It will not replicate to the main or any other domain controller. This domain controller is going to be separate domain controller. So in here we are going to use existing domain, which is going to make it additional domain. So our existing domain name is Elmjo Tech. So it is asking me for the username and password, and I'm gonna supply the username and password for elmjotech.local. Press OK. It just found it, if you see, and then next. So you must supply an account name. I'll just change this in here. It didn't work because I was using the domain nycejodco1, which is not going to work. We need to use elmjotech.local/administrator, which will change the domain name down in there, and then this credentials that we will supply in here will be the credentials from our Sacramento domain controller. If you do not do that, it is not going to work. So once again, if you see in here, it is not working. So because it says that the password is incorrect, I cannot just apply it again, no problem. elmgeotech.local/administrator and then the password. Press OK, press next. Alright, it is asking me again, and elmgeotech.local and /administrator and then the password. Let me pause the video and find out what's going on. The username and password is incorrect, I'm sure. Alright, so it just worked. I just closed it and then I clicked on this thing again, and then I just applied the ElmGeoTech password and it worked. So it was not a big deal, like I didn't do anything else. It was just the username and password. That's all I did. Okay, so the next step is going to be we are going to make this as a DNS server, and we are going to make it as a global catalog. And if you see in here, it is asking us something, allow domain controller reinstall. Like if we want to reinstall a domain controller, it should allow us. And it says in here we got something saying an account with the name of the server have been found in the directory. In order to continue, you need to confirm that you want to reinstall this domain controller. So what it is saying is that this NYC EJO DC01 account is already found in here, and in order to just install this, you need to select this allow domain controller reinstall. So it's gonna reinstall it. So I'm gonna supply a password in here. Press next. Next. It's gonna replicate to any domain controller, and again the database folder where are your all your objects like users, groups and everything are your log files that you can use to troubleshoot, your sysvol folder where you got your scripts and your group policies. Press next. Next. After checking the summary, it's gonna see the prerequisites, and if there are any issues, it's gonna just tell us. If not, then it's gonna do the installation. Alright, so the prerequisite is good, so we can simply click on install and it will start the deployment for us. It is replicating now to your Sacramento domain controller, like copying all the objects, all users, making sure that when you open your additional domain controller, all objects are same as your primary domain controller. So that's what replication does. Like it copies everything from the main domain controller, and main domain controller copies everything to the additional domain controller, making sure that their database is up to date. So the installation is done, and it is going to restart our server or our domain controller. So for the next time when you start it, it should be your domain controller, like your additional domain controller, ready to use. Alright, so the server restarted, and if you see, when I just went to command prompt and I typed netshare, and I can see netlogon and sysvol folder in here. So most of the times when your server becomes a domain controller and when you do a netshare, it's gonna show you the netlogon and sysvol folder. So I can see it, and NSLOOKUP is working fine, I think. No, it is not, because it is picking up the IPv6 address, and in order to disable that, I'll simply uncheck uh, IPv6 address, and after this it is gonna work. So our domain controller, our additional domain controller is now ready to use. The next lab is going to be about installing Windows Server 2012 for our Exchange server for New York office, and then we will be installing Exchange server. So I hope it was useful video for you, and I'll see you on next lesson.